we're coming down from the arc of this journey. And as we come down from the arc of the journey and you guys return home, landing smoothly is really important to preserve as much of the work that took place for you here. And there's things that have shifted that you might not even be aware of yet. And you may become aware of them months down the road. And so all that has transpired here and everything that has become apparent and obvious to you, that's great, but there's also a lot of stuff underneath that will, in the coming days, weeks, months, will reveal itself. So I just wanted to put that here in the sense that, like, in our group contemplation and also in our individual reflection, because we have more time to be in meditation, these final days we're going to be meditating a little more. Like, the contemplation is how to in what small ways can I preserve my energy? Like, it's almost going to be impossible. It will be impossible to take exactly this home, because we don't have a sangha at home like this. I mean, you might, but not everybody's been in a 3-week container eating khichdi for a week, So just in your personal process and your contemplation these final days, investigating the little ways that you can incorporate small practices, in terms of what you've identified in yourself as important for you, right? You all know what I'm talking about. And don't do it all at once, Don't do it all at once. If it's just a couple double breathing Kriya and a Surya Namaskar and an early dinner or whatever, little bits. I remember for me, my teacher gave me 0 guidelines about my return from Costa Rica. And it was my first trip to Costa Rica. And so I get back to Arizona and I remember being scared of a car that drove by. I was walking to the park and a car drove by super fast and I was like, because we haven't left this piece of land, it's going to be a shock. And so I just want to gently ease you guys back in, given all that the things that you're sharing, and hopefully one of the ways we can do that is closing out with this final segue, this piece that I'm going to share with you guys about meditation and how the Yoga Sutras views meditation, and what meditation even is. It's not just sitting and thinking. So the lecture today is on meditation, which again isn't just sitting and thinking or not thinking. Yeah. And so again, I'll ask to hold questions, write down questions, comments, things, and I will share some things with you. In case you're wondering, page 180 in your book will have, as at the top, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, or 179 perhaps. And the page before has Pratyahara. So Pratyahara would be, so we have all been in a stage of Pratyahara just by being here on this property. Our senses have been withdrawn from the world, meaning any of the ways that we've been plugged into news outlets or social media or family or whatever, all of that energy that was plugged in those spaces has been withdrawn temporarily. So just that alone is what's called pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses. And I like to think of it as a turtle bringing its limbs into its shell. And in the space of creation, I think of yoga and the path of yoga as the reverse engineering of creation. I think I said that earlier in this training, that we're reverse engineering creation and going back to the source. And what I mean by that is like, I think of like my life process as a yogic process, in the sense that I look at what I've created, and then I can examine the different steps of my personal life and choices that have allowed that creation to take place or not take place. This can go both ways. If something is happening in my life that is apparently not what I really want, because I can feel I have the feeling about it, I'm like connected to the result, and I'm like, it's not a good result. This can be in relationships, this can be in a job experience or a project. You guys know what I'm talking about? Then I have an outcome. If you remember that flow chart from Purusha to outcome, I have a clear outcome, and it's a data point for me. And if I can kind of do my process of withdrawing inward, instead of being so still stuck on the thing, I can bring myself back into my energy and bring my power back from that experience. Then I can create a new outcome. That becomes wisdom instead of just a thing. Right? I can turn it into wisdom. And so pratyahara, in terms of practice, is pulling, like actively withdrawing our energy and attention from the thing, from the things. And in classically, we're talking about from everything else other than spirit. Because remember the word in the Yoga Sutras for spirit, do you guys remember what it was? Purusha. Purusha. Atman is a aspect of Purusha, you could say. Okay. Yeah. But there's in the Yoga Sutras, or Samkhya philosophy, you guys remember Samkhya? Samkhya is the underlying metaphysical framework of the Yoga Sutras. You have Purusha, which is spirit and consciousness, and then you have everything else, Prakriti. And so, right here in Edwin Bryant's Sutras, page 394, he says, Purusha can only and must be aware by its very constitution only when it ceases to be aware of Prakriti. Because it has no other choice by dint of its very nature than to be aware of itself. Awareness can only be self-aware or other-aware. Make sense? Awareness can only be self-aware or other-aware. And so in yoga, as we progress on the stages, starting with the yamas, to the niyamas, to the asana, to the pranayama, we're progressing from levels of density, like the sense objects and what I perceive is a level of density. Even my mind is a level of density. It's a little less dense than my body. Prana is a little less dense. And I'm bringing awareness back in. And this is the containment that Jack was talking about. As energy comes back to us, it starts to vibrate. And that's what everybody has been going through, this. And what does that vibration do? It stirs up all the Prakriti, all of it. Anything where it's not in harmonic resonance with the universe is now being... Pratyahara is just continuously withdrawing our attention from the process that happens when the vibration starts to really be a lot. Guess what the mind likes to do? Pew! Pew! It tries to go find something to do because it's a lot. And so the practices we're doing, all of the technical stuff we're doing with the mantras and the asanas and the pranayamas and the kriyas, all of that is designed to create the organism that can hold the field of spirit for longer, so that creation can happen more naturally. It's just, there's just a flow of creation when the system is set up properly. Creation is just effortlessly happening because it's what's supposed to happen. Otherwise, according to the tradition, the karma and the karmic matrix is causing a repeat of things. And so when that vibration gets to be a lot, and the mind goes, a lot of times the mind is jumping to something it already knows because it's familiar and it's safe and it's grabbing for that and it's confirming the individual self bringing us back to, back to me, mine. And as we've learned in Tantra is what, you guys remember the definition of Tantra? Weave and expand. Expansion. It's an expansion process. Learning how to turn the limited identity over to the unlimited again and again and again and again, so that limited sense of self start to realize, it's actually part of a greater pattern. And then it's that reciprocity. I love this here. This is kind of a completely unrelated thing, but my page is open to it, and it was kind of what we were talking about. I'm just gonna hold that. I'm gonna hold that. Not now. Containment. It's not the time. There is a time and a space for everything. There's a time and a space for everything. And all of the things that need to happen will happen in their right time and space. Sutra 1.37. We're transitioning from the lower rungs into the higher rungs. Right? We have our yamas and niyamas, which help us conduct ourselves in the mundane existence, quote unquote mundane existence. We start to practice our asana so that we can bring ourselves into stability and ease at the same time, which is important for the nervous system. We start to regulate our breathing, which allows us to turn breath work into pranayama, right? Gathering our energy and circulating it in a healthy way. And as all of this happens, the senses, which are normally, like what was Sage saying the other day, learning how through Krishna consciousness and Bhakti Yoga, which is about using the senses to worship the self, to worship God. Instead of worship the things that gratify the senses, which it can be really easy to do, the senses are instead turned to the subtler layer. So pratyahara is like the turtle withdrawing its limbs into its shell. If you could think of your senses as, like the way I visualize this is that your senses are like little tentacles reaching out into the world to grab stuff and pull it to you. And if we are constantly bound by these tentacles reaching out to grab stuff and pull them to us, then our attention has a really hard time resting in silence internally, because silence means nothing to the senses. It's not gratifying to the senses. Yet it is eternally blissful, and it is true. And I would add and make the case to say that there is a bliss that is beyond the senses, that as we become more and more aware of it, this bliss becomes more gratifying because it is eternal. It doesn't have an end to it. Everything else that we can get here has an end to it, and we know that, and it causes us to suffer. Yet it doesn't stop us from continuing in the cycle of wanting more things. I will read 1.37 in a moment because I did want to complete Pratyahara. Yoga Sutra 2.54, it's in your book at the top. 178. 2.54 says, when the mental organs of the senses and the actions of the senses cease to be engaged with the corresponding objects in their mental realm, and assimilate or turn back into the mind field from which they arose, this is called pratyahara and is the fifth step of yoga. 2.55, through the turning of the organs of the senses and actions also comes a supreme ability, control ability, or mastery over those senses inclined to go outwards towards their objects. Very valuable sutras there. This is exactly what I have continued to be reminding us of in our space of containment and fire and tapas and all of the things that we've been practicing, is gaining control over these freaking things instead of having them control us. And it takes consistent practice. It's not going to happen in 3 weeks. A lot of it can happen in 3 weeks, and it's lifetimes of this practicing. And I'm sure you have all felt, or have you guys felt like the benefits of containment in your process? Yeah? Cool.
I really noticed it this week, missing the containment of fire. Like, I don't have as much energy, the hill's harder.
Yes.
I'm tired.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
We're not eating pictures.
Oh, it's partially that.
It is partially that.
So page 179, these are technically what we would call the inner yoga. So we have the outer yoga, and we have now the inner yoga. The words are dharana, you notice the H, dhyana, and samadhi. The inward journey back to one's realization of one's true nature. I feel like that line right there is worthy of being underlined because we're talking about the thing, right? This is the thing. The journey to realize one's true nature. Inward. It's not outward. We all know that, right? It's an inward journey. Doesn't mean it's easy. In fact, the hardest thing I think anyone could do. Sutra 3.1 talks about dharana. Concentration, that's what dharana means, is the process of holding or fixing the attention of mind onto one object or place. This is the 6th of the 8 rungs. The reason concentration comes after the first 5 is because we can't actually concentrate until our energy is collected in one place. Otherwise, we concentrate for a moment and then... You guys know what I mean? Concentration. True concentration. The beautiful thing is that even if we don't reach the grand final finale of being a self-realized enlightened master, who gives a shit? Being able to concentrate is important. Being able to actually be in your body is important. Enlightenment is a process. It is a spectrum. We have all enlightened ourselves in the past couple weeks together. You are now more enlightened you than you were a couple weeks ago. Maybe, I don't know. That's just I feel that from you. And I think that our entire life process is a journey of enlightening ourselves. Even if we're not practicing yoga sadhana all the time, we're still learning lessons and trying to grow and do this whole thing. And part of that is in concentration. Because when we can concentrate on a thing, we can feel a feeling for long enough for that feeling to reveal. Otherwise, the feelings stay vague. They're hard to know what they are. They kind of stay hidden from us. Because when we start to concentrate and triangulate on them, it starts to do the thing. And then we get right close to where all the Shakti is and where it's kept hidden. And then we go, whoa, what about that thing over there? And then we completely forget what we were concentrating on. It's the journey of the winding, going all the way into the subterranean realm of our unconscious to find the thing that's hidden from our own conscious mind. And as soon as we get there, we're like, oh my God. And then we're like, oh yeah, what was I doing anyways? Can you relate? It is a profound inner journey to feel everything. Everything that we've kept ourselves from feeling. Because feeling at different points in our life has been overwhelming. And if we've ever been in a completely overwhelming situation, raise your hand if you have. Did everyone raise their hand? I wasn't looking. I had a feeling. We in moments of overwhelm where our nervous system isn't capable of sustaining the load of Shakti, it fragments and part of it closes off. And part of it remains hidden now and literally protects us from that thing, if you could imagine. So it's like, as a child, before the world does its thing, because the world's not perfect. It's not perfect. In fact, it is perfect and it's beautiful. And there's a lot of challenges being here on planet Earth. And as a little being, where we're pure and innocent and expansive, and our field is so open and our senses are plugged into truth, because we're so connected to nature. We're magical, we're playful, we're imaginative, we're inspired, we're creative. Our kundalini is, wah! But it hasn't been contained yet. It's learning how to be contained. Something happens to a child, it's overwhelming. There's not enough of a buddhi, not enough of a logical, rational faculty developed of the mind enough to understand why. And so the feeling is not matched with a reason enough, and then the nervous system just, and it cuts part of the feeling self off. And then the thinking mind takes over and it starts to lead the charge, and it will create whatever story needs to be in place so that the organism can continue. This is the confusion of a child who has poor caregivers. The people who are supposed to take care of the child and the child has learned to attach to is getting a confusing message, and it doesn't understand why. And so it really starts to mess with the energetic system of that child. Repatterning that nervous system is basically the process that we're all going through. Repatterning from anywhere in our upbringing or childhood or teenage years, we fragmented. Remember when we were singing last night and I was like, get that part of you that's stuck in the past back here. Sing it back, call it back, do whatever you can to bring it back, because those parts of us, like soul retrieval, right, is a real thing. And scientifically, it's just finding where in the nervous system there's a hole in the field and energy is escaping to cause a loop, a vritti, and we just go find that place, experience that memory, and basically love that 5-year-old part of us back into integration. Concentration. Dharana. This is what's possible through being able to concentrate for longer periods of time without interrupting our focus. It will also allow us as teachers to pay close attention to what someone is doing. Not what they're saying with their mouth, but the energy that they are emitting. So when you're listening to someone, you can ask them questions. We'll get to questions tomorrow, about in space holding and teaching, and it's just questions. They're your best friend. Ask more questions. Find out more, and you start to do that thing that you're doing in yourself with them, because there's a collective nervous system that has a bunch of holes in it too. And that's the nervous system that we all share. And we get to, what does healing mean? It means to become whole. It's we're not healing anybody. It is healing us back to being together, to be whole as one. And so we can go into that, and just by asking questions, without my ego being oh yeah, me too, or oh, I know what that, it's just wait, can I be in my center? Can I be grounded in my body? Can I feel what this person is saying so that they feel felt by me? Because sometimes people don't feel themselves, and they need another nervous system there to co-regulate with in order to feel their feeling. Me being with you allows you to actually, Like anything that was hidden before from yourself, by yourself, now there's an extra light on the thing. Concentration, very important. Being able to stay with it for longer. Like when you're chanting the mantra and it starts to get really low, and you're like, I don't know if Grant's still chanting, but like, I'm still chanting. Because you're staying with it. You're now completely internalizing, and now you're in your process and you're following your little thing in. I might still be chanting too, and maybe I'm doing the same thing. We'll never know. We are trying to get to the same place, right? We're all trying to get to the same place. My teacher told me once, in terms of chanting mantras, when in doubt, don't stop. When in doubt, don't stop. Concentration, being able to follow and continue. Even when the mind is trying to even when fireworks are going off. Like it says, if solicited by celestial beings, the yogi should not become smug, because the tendency towards undesirable consequences can once again manifest. This is Sutra 3.51. It said, if solicited by celestial beings, the yogi should not become smug, because the tendency towards undesirable consequences. What he's saying is that there's going to be all sorts of stuff that happens when you're really going through these processes and going deeper in. There's going to be things that come and like, Ganesha might visit you, or Shiva, or whomever might, your great grandpa. Don't be smug. You have a goal, right? You're on your path. There's going to be other things that try to take you off. Continue like a laser.
When it says don't be smug, what is it meaning? Like I know what the word smug means, but like
You mean welcome it?
yeah.
Can I say something?
Hold on. It literally means like, don't be conceited.
Like, oh, my spirits are with me.
Exactly. Yep.
Like that kind of thing.
Because then your concentration is broken, and now you're in a kind of an egoic, like, yeah, like I'm doing it right,
Would you say like keeping an open like gratefulness instead, or like
Sure. Curiosity.
Like, what is this? Not the thing.
not like placing a name on it?
Yes.
Being open.
Big one.
What's the number?
That one was page 294 in your Edwin Bryant Sutras. The number is 3.51. And then in Sutra 3.2, as we have withdrawn our senses away from the things that are causing our mind to go outward, pratyahara, and we're concentrating, dharana, the repeated continuation or uninterrupted stream of that one point of focus is called absorption in meditation. This is dhyana. This is the 7th of the 8 steps. Dhyana. And these words, dharana and dhyana, have that same root as the word dharma. Dra. Dra. D-R with a dot under the R. Which means to uplift or to uphold. So being able to uplift or uphold. So like in Hindu thought and in the thoughts of these practices that we're talking about in this tradition of yoga, this is traditional physics, traditional Hindu physics, you could say. There's only one moment in all of reality, ever. Because the earlier moment has passed, and the future moment has not yet to be. And this is literally true, if you can imagine, which is mind-blowing. It's just completely mind-bogglingly mind-blowing. There's only one moment. And so in dhyana, once our energy is collected and we actually have something, one of my teachers would say, like, don't get a bunch of Shakti and then just let it go everywhere. Like, it's so precious what you guys have done here. It's so precious. Like, be with that treasure. Just like if someone gives you an acknowledgement, be with the treasure of the acknowledgement. You know, let it, bring it in and just be with it. And that's the concentration piece, is to be able to stay and then become absorbed in the thing. Like I was watching, Ashley, can I pick on you for a moment? Okay. Just last night I looked over at you and you were completely absorbed. Completely. You were in a high state of yoga and meditation. I was watching, I could feel you. And you weren't anywhere else.
No.
You were here.
I have made it.
You were so here. So here. And I was like, wow. And then afterwards you just gave me a bow, and I just looked in your eye, and we smiled, and I was like, nice. And that is what you were exemplifying there is your process of what we're describing. Pulling your energy and attention away from the world and turning it on the one. And then being focused on the one uninterruptedly. Dhyana. Repeated continuation, not just a few times. You know, why do you think the Dooni's 2 hours and 15 minutes? We get lots of practice trying to be in continual thing.
That's a question. Is
yeah.
the dharana, is it focusing on like a statue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So she asked a good question about dharana, and in the tradition, I'm going to read from this one, Samadhi Pada. This is the first book of the sutras. But Patanjali talks about how there are multiple ways to establish concentration. And one of them says, by meditating on a well-considered object of one's choice. You get to choose. How cool is that? It's like, I don't care if you meditate on this or that. Is it allowing you to stay in a concentrated space? So that's why, you know, these sculptures, or like a yantra or a mantra, which is also an object, or the breath, these are all different forms of objects that we can choose to meditate upon. But it needs to bring us to the goal. It needs to hold our concentration. Like in Sutra 3.3, continuing on what you're saying, Ashley, when only the essence of that object, place, or point shines forth in the mind, as if devoid even of its own form, that state of deep absorption is called deep concentration, or samadhi, which is the 8th rung. At different points in your Dooni, in your fire ritual, or in spinal breathing, did it ever feel like the mantra was doing itself?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you're just like, well, there's no you really anymore at that point, right? It's just the thing is happening. Absorption, completely. Or you may get to points where you're in a meditation where you feel like you're being breathed. Where the breath is breathing you. It's in that moment, I believe, it doesn't say this here explicitly, but I feel, and my experience leads me to believe and have this conclusion, that it's when we experience those moments that there's a complete rearrangement in our individual consciousness. And there's no journaling, that's going to integrate that experience, because it's already immediately integrated the moment it is experienced. It's like it's like, okay. It's just like, it's humbling, and it's empowering, and it softens us, and we're just like sitting in the seat of truth, right? We don't need to, there's no hurrah. It's just like, oh, okay, all right, moving on. Audrey, you had a question.
Yeah. To comment on what you just said, it feels like scientifically, it feels like your brain is creating new neural pathways that are more highly in tune with just the vibration of life.
Exactly.
And then the question was, how do you meditate on a yantra? Because isn't it a visual representation of a mantra?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you meditate on that? Do you stare at it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Holding questions and comments. Thank you. Sutra 3.4. The three processes of do you guys remember that first one? What does it mean? Concentration, and then dhyana, absorption, and then samadhi. Yeah, you could say union. Samadhi is union. When taken together on the same object, place, or point is called samyama. Samyama. There was a practice I was doing for a while from aypsite.org. You guys remember aypsite.org? Advanced Yoga Practices. Go check it out when you get home. It's amazing. Samyama, there's a particular practice in there that he calls samyama. And I'll just leave that there. It's worthy of taking a look. There's a whole book on it, actually. But what we're trying to do, and what these higher limbs of yoga are designed to do, is to continue to corral energy, to refine energy, until it is a laser beam, and it is only illuminating that which you want it to illuminate. Which, as it becomes corralled and refined and is in its rarefied form, you could say that it only illuminates that which wants to be illuminated. The self. It's like a natural involution. It's a process. Becoming free and liberating ourselves from the mind. There have been many masters of different traditions who have explained this journey. To free ourselves from suffering. To free ourselves from the cycle. These higher limbs are just explaining those steps of the mind that the mind goes through. This is how we go beyond concepts. And we can no longer, you get to a point where concepts no longer work. There's no more, there's not a framework at that point. Just like the moment, this moment, which is the only moment that could ever be, doesn't need a concept, right? As soon as I say that it's now, it's no longer now. It's profound. And so understanding that, I think, is yeah. So that's the conversation about dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, the higher limbs of yoga. Discussion, notes, questions, comments. Jen.
I have 3 questions.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so my first question is, you said, so you talked about overwhelming experiences in childhood as being too much Shakti.
Yep.
Does that imply that reception of like an experience or a trauma or a thing, you're receiving Shakti from another person, or what's that story?
Mm-hmm.
How does that increase? Is it that you get it?
Yeah, so Yes. So thinking like I use the voltage example a lot. Like we're born with a certain capacity for voltage in our system. And if something is overwhelming, it's often because the voltage that came in was too much. Right? So like, because we're resilient we're really resilient creatures, but we're also extremely fragile. And we can break easily. We can break bones and stuff, but like our energetic field and the emotional system and psychological system is a really sensitive process. And so I feel like, I'm just thinking about how to answer this question.
I could ask a furthering clarifying
Ask a furthering clarifying question.
Do experiences have Shakti or just beings?
What was the second?
Do experiences have Shakti
Yeah.
or just beings?
Uh-huh. Just beings like us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm gonna think of like traditionally how it would be positioned, because we're just talking about Purusha and Prakriti. I would say that it's the feeling of the being that colors the experience. So it gives the experience the Shakti that it has. That was what I would think.
And so you're never taking someone's Shakti, or say you and I, we're gonna have a fight, and then we have this shared field, and
Right.
go our separate ways.
Yeah.
Everybody leaves with all the shit they came with, but you may just not have access to as much of it because it's licking its wounds. Or do we come together, shit gets in balance, and I leave with my trophy that's your Shakti?
I think there's a deeper karmic mechanism in that too, because I think that we share a karmic field, and like that we all have soul contracts. This is my belief, which has to do with like us working out this thing that you're saying on a higher level, and I don't know the answer like exactly. I don't know if I can like explain it, but like I feel what you're saying. Yeah, and I feel like for me, like as I study this more and more and more, I start to like feel like we're in a kind of a karmic machine, and we're all kind of like trying to figure out what that karmic machine, why we're in it in the first place, and then we realize, oh, each person in my field is like bringing to me what I need for my liberation. And if I really like accept that, that's what empowers me, and then the other choice is disempowerment.
So it's only, the other scenario is it's returning the pieces.
It's returning the pieces to you.
Remembering.
Remembering, exactly. So like Joe Dispenza talks about how a woman in his training had like crippling MS or something like that, and was like couldn't walk and was like having serious autoimmune attacks, and maybe some of you guys have heard the story, but she went through like a severe rape when she was younger, and it was like really a terrible. I mean, I just get like just thinking about like the things that have happened to people, but she had this moment of like clicking in with her higher self. And it was like grace descended. It was like descent of grace on her, and she saw the assaultants as the angels that were sent to her to help her have that realization then. And it was like this quantum like, and she immediately like in that moment was like her pain went down like 90% or something, and was like all the symptoms and like the biological markers of her disease just like completely diminished. And I love that story because it's like, again, knowing the higher order of things from the small mind is impossible. And you like I've gone, even after understanding this, I've been betrayed, and I've been like, oh, fuck that person, like they and yes, there's a place for righteous anger, absolutely. And there was like a whole process I had to go through myself on a spiritual level to understand what was that for me, and where was my power displaced, and how can I get it back, irrespective of whatever happened and whatever my opinion about it was. Where's my soul still stuck? Right? Where is it still stuck in the thing? And some of you may go on to work in some really crazy places, Lily. Like, I bless your journey into where you're going, and because you will encounter this in beings, and that, and you're accepting that. And like, part of our job, I think, as we understand this, is learning how to just like support, instead of trying to fix, instead of whatever the mind is thinking. It's just like how to support the energy in returning home, and how to facilitate the return of that energy. Yeah, thank you. It's such a good question.
2 more questions.
Okay.
Simple.
Okay.
Can meditation be active? Because you said that breath reading you, and remember
Yeah.
that was my line after the big BBK.
Yeah.
Fuck, I hit that place where
Yes.
it just breathes you.
Right.
Could it be active?
Active meditation, yes, and so we have to think about traditional meditation according to yoga, because that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Or I would like to, because that's the topic. I can't speak to like walking forms of meditation and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But we're talking about like from asana to pranayama to pratyahara to concentration, right? And the reason I think this is set up that way is because this allows, like, in terms of walking meditation and things like that, doesn't, like, I don't think there's anything bad or wrong about that at all. Like, I think we can develop states of concentration in anything we're doing. This is just what presents to me as helpful for the nervous system in its like